Yeah, so welcome to episode 85. My name is Katie.
I'm Garrett.
And before we get into that, I have a very exciting housekeeping update. We have a new Patreon subscriber.
Woo-woo!
Welcome to the party, Preeti Upadhyaya.
Oh no.
Preeti Upadhyaya. I am so sorry. I had practiced it before we started recording, and obviously not enough.
I mean, you know what the thing is when it comes to pronunciation, I'll like have my initial thought and then I find the right way to do it. But then it's like I have both of those in my brain and I'll
Yes.
never be able to distinguish what the right one is.
Yes. That's how I
And
feel
it's embarrassing and I hate it about myself.
a lot of words that are like I before E except after C, and then like unless sounding like A as in neighbor or way, like, and then there's like an extra part to that rhyme that I can
I
never
didn't know
remember.
that. I didn't even know there was more to it.
Oh yeah.
That's
But
really
then
cool.
well, you're welcome.
I'm fucking nerd here.
But
Who's the
then I
nerd?
like get into my head about it, and then because there's that other part, and I'm like, yeah, but then there's like weird, which doesn't sound like an A, and it's an I before E situation. And like, I don't know. It's just like this whole
No,
thing.
it's
And
not.
I don't know. There's like something about weird and
You said that. So you said weird, and I was like, okay. And then I'm thinking, no, that's EI. And it
let me
doesn't
see
sound like
what the
A.
internet says.
And then you said IE, and I'm like, oh no. I don't think that's right.
Okay. So according to Merriam-Webster,
That would be a trusted source.
the question is I before E except after C always correct? The short answer is no, and there are countless exceptions to the rule. Too
Yeah.
many to make a cute phrase about.
Oh man.
Okay, here it is. It's on a mug. I before E except when your foreign neighbor Keith receives 8 counterfeit beige sleighs from feisty caffeinated weightlifters. Weird. And then weird is EIRD.
Oh, that's good.
And weird, like I before E except after C. I don't know. It's just like
Yeah. The English language is stupid.
like foreign. That's not an
It's
that's not
EI.
an A sound. Right.
No.
So it's not I before E.
No. It's not.
And it doesn't sound like A. So
It's I before E occasionally.
right. And like receives. So like receives I always fuck
Oh.
up because it doesn't sound like I mean it's
Receipts?
after C, but like I don't know. It's just like an 8 like
Yeah. I'll never get
counterfeit
receipts right.
receipts. Receipts and recipes, fuck off. Fuck all of the
Yeah.
way off. I blame the French.
There was one time, there was a guy I was dating and we were
His
I
name
don't
was
know if
Keith
we were
and he spelled it
texting.
weird.
Did you see that episode of Modern Family where Cam's ex Keith? So it was K E I Keith? Yeah, Keith is K E I
Yes.
F T H. And Mitchell was like, "Is anybody else hearing this?" And Cam was it's very simple. It's Keith. There's a
So
running joke the whole episode.
that movie, I love the other guys. I don't know if
Mhm.
it's in the regular version or in the extended cut. The extended cut is my favorite version of that movie, and I usually hate extended cuts. But in one version of that movie, his Will Ferrell's ex is named Christineth with a TH. And the Mark Wahlberg keeps calling her Christina, and her now husband is like, or she goes, "My name is Christineth. Are you dumb or deaf?" And her husband's like, "Her name is Christineth. You come into my house, you get my wife's name right." And he like freaks. And Mark Wahlberg is like, "I'm sorry."
Cut to Katie being like, "I before E except neighbor."
And it's a TH after A if
So then, but only if
only on a Tuesday, but only if it's the first Tuesday following the first Monday on a holiday weekend. And
but if it's an even year, you skip it,
right.
and then man, our intern is gonna have a real hell of a time editing this episode, I can already tell.
He's just gonna hate it.
Sorry. He's gonna hate
Mwah.
that.
This is what you're unpaid for. So,
Sorry. Um,
but
well, that's
anyway,
exciting
welcome to the
housekeeping.
team,
We're really
Preeti.
sorry.
Yeah, I did try. I'm sorry, but thank you so much for joining our Patreon. If you want to
Yes.
join Preeti in our Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/thebarisAnkleHigh. You get ad-free episodes, video episodes, and extended cut episodes. Also, you get added to our close friends list on Instagram, and you get a cool shout out. So, you got all that going for you.
Where could you go wrong?
I don't know. Anyway, today, hold on, I gotta adjust. Sorry, I slid down in my seat because
Jiminy Glick.
my pants are slippery, and my footrest got pushed away by the dog.
Jiminy Glickin' all
Yep,
day.
I took my meds though.
I didn't.
So today, like last week, we were talking about masking and unmasking. And today, as promised, we are talking about reasonable accommodations at work.
I'm really
So
excited about this, to learn about this.
it was really interesting and I think it'll be really helpful. However, I am talking about the US laws about reasonable accommodations. Um, I'm fairly certain that most other countries have similar protections in place. But I was not about to try to delve into um, like European or Australian laws and all that. Um,
I
I'm
mean, remember
sorry.
when we were looking at shipping things internationally and taxes, and we were afraid
The
Interpol was gonna come after us, and
the European value added tax system can eat my entire gaping butthole because that system is
wow.
it's so deranged. I don't understand it whatsoever. It's also like 22% on most things. It's like an
Yeah,
insane amount of tax. It's fucking
yeah,
deliriously high.
yeah.
But at least you guys have healthcare. So, and like
Yeah, you know what?
comprehensive public education.
And some form of parental leave,
Yeah,
and, um, you
childcare.
yeah, you, like, ban products that make people sick and ingredients that make people sick,
Mhm.
and diseased. We don't do that.
Nah.
So, I mean, you know what? 22% tax? Huh, I hear you. Fine. Anyway,
Anyway,
reasonable
um
accommodation.
the point is that European laws
Herding cats
are
today.
very yeah, the European laws are very confusing to me. So I did not delve into it. But like I said, my understanding is that there are comparable laws and protections in other countries. So you can use this as like an outline of what to look for if you're not in America.
I'm sure there's lots of equivalencies for all kinds of things.
Yeah. Um so in the US, the federal law that provides protections is called the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. It protects people with disabilities, including ADHD or other mental health conditions, but also physical health conditions. So, like epilepsy, if you have mobility issues, all that. Um, so, first things first, in the US, your employer cannot ask you if you have ADHD, and they cannot ask anything about your medical or psychiatric history. The only exception to this is if during the hiring process you ask for a reasonable accommodation. If the need for that accommodation is not obvious, like if you're not in a wheelchair and asking about elevators or ramps, the employer can ask for documentation about the disability, like a doctor's note. Also, workplace accommodations are not a use it or lose it kind of thing. So you don't lose your right to request accommodations if you don't disclose it during the hiring process or at any point during your employment. However, if you fail to disclose it and you fail to meet job expectations because of your condition, you do not have a recourse if you're penalized or fired because of your failure to meet your job condition. So if you have issues with like time blindness and time management, and then you miss a huge deadline at work, if they don't know that you're struggling with time blindness and time management because of your ADHD, you can still be like reprimanded or fired for failing to meet that deadline
Mhm.
if you haven't told them about your ADHD. So in 2008, it used to be that the ADA was very narrowly interpreted by the courts. So basically, like if the statute didn't explicitly give you that accommodation or explicitly recognize that condition. So, and when I say explicit, I mean like they spelled it out. They actually wrote it in black and white text. If it used to be that if that was not explicitly stated in the statute, that the um, the courts found that the employer did not have to give you those accommodations. But in 2008, there was the ADA quote Amendments Act, making it now the ADAAA, which when you write it out, it looks like the castle
Ada.
Ah from Monty Python.
Uh,
um, but so now with the 2008 amendments, we do a broad interpretation in favor of providing protections to individuals, and allows for somebody to be disabled in one major life activity without being disabled in all activities. So you can have difficulty with work tasks and qualify for ADA protections even if you can handle tasks at home or the other way around.
yeah. So it's like putting
Um,
the reasonable back in reasonable accommodation.
yeah. So it also allows for the use of mitigating measures, like medications, mobility devices, hearing aids, cochlear implants, and prosthetics, and provides that the use of those do not disqualify you from protection under the ADA. However, ordinary glasses and contact lenses are not covered by the ADA. So, like, I don't know what reasonable accommodation you would need if you're not like deemed to be legally blind, but if you just, I don't, I don't know what that would be. So, like, basically, they're like glasses aren't a disability in for purposes
Maybe you would
of
need to be like
the
legally
Americans with
blind.
Disabilities Act. Yes, that's what I mean. Like if you're
Yeah,
legally
yeah,
blind
yeah.
and you require
Right.
like a special
Those
they have
those
like
magnifying things on the monitors,
the
the
magnifying thing, or they have things that will like read aloud
mhm,
documents to you, like
mhm,
that
like a
would be
not a
something.
dictation. It's like the opposite of dictation
Right.
almost.
That's more than a like ordinary glasses prescription. Like if you
Mhm,
require like specialized eye care, different.
mhm.
But again, that would go into like the doctor's note situation.
Yeah.
So,
Or if there's like a light that's too bright over your desk,
for example,
for
um,
example.
other measures like assistive technology, like a sign language interpreter or learned behavioral or adaptive modifications also don't disqualify you from ADA protection. So if you like going back to masking, if you handle your ADHD by setting 17 different alarms and that's how you manage, just because that's how you need to manage your ADHD at work doesn't mean that you aren't eligible for other reasonable accommodations that would make it so you don't have to set 17 alarms. Or maybe you're still setting the 17 alarms, but now you have something else to help you get your meetings or whatever. Also, individuals with episodic conditions like epilepsy, diabetes, or multiple sclerosis are protected even if their impairments are considered disabling in their active state. So you like if you're just having like a flare up of like Crohn's or something,
Mhm.
and that requires that you work at home because of your bathroom needs during that flare up, that would qualify you for a reasonable accommodation, even if you don't need that reasonable accommodation when you're not in the middle of a flare.
Okay.
Which again kind of goes back to that you don't, it's not a use it or lose it thing.
Right.
You don't have to have it all the time.
Well, and it's
Um,
realistic about, people that live with all kinds of conditions.
right.
You know, not only the way you're impacted by it, but the way you kind of adapt to those things too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably lots of things you've already found work. I mean, ADHD, how many things have we found workarounds for on our own that we did because we didn't know we had ADHD for,
I mean, that's
decades.
what inspired the podcast, right? Like turning
Right.
around and being like, "Wait a
Right.
minute." So like I didn't have to be doing this
Right.
many different things. Like I don't have to have
Mm.
normal people don't have a laundry basket in every room because they can't
Mhm.
manage bringing their laundry to one location.
Yeah. The whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Um,
So it's
also
good that
though,
they're allowing that kind of fluidity because I
well,
think
and
that's
I
the
think
reality of a lot of these diagnoses.
it's also the reality for ADHD. I mean, like, what
Mhm.
did we learn in our hormone episodes? Like, during your cycle, if you're AFAB, your symptoms are going to be so much worse right before your period starts
Mhm.
than they are normally. So, like, your medication won't be as effective. Maybe you have
Mhm.
to go on to a higher dose, or you're taking a different medication that maybe makes you more sleepy during that
Mhm.
time if you have PMDD or something. So, like, there's all these different things that aren't an always problem for you, but you still have these workarounds like a heating pad at your desk or whatever. You wear, I don't know, like almost I feel
Like
like if
those,
I wear
heaty the I not the icy hot pads,
well,
those
I was
salon
thinking like
paws.
almost like Spanx, like if I have something that's like tighter
Mhm.
around as much as
Like
like
that even pressure.
yes,
Mhm.
but in any event. Again, that would be invisible. Like I'm not walking around the office like with my Spanx out to like show
You're not
off.
walking around the office in a diaper? Because
Not
I
that
can
they
tell you
know.
depends
You would
works.
never even know.
You knew.
Just
You knew when I
ask
was wearing them.
Lisa Rinna.
You could tell. You could tell I was wearing them. The baby and I had the same build.
Um, Also, the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act only applies to employers with 15 or more employees, but many states have accompanying legislation that expands ADA protections to even smaller companies. So check with your state.
Okay.
Just
As like a
FYI.
Band-Aid. Mhm.
Yeah, if you work for like a much smaller company and
Mm.
you're worried about making this request or whatever, check with your state to see if like your state has more expansive legislation about it.
Mhm.
Um I know in New York State we have the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. That's who I would reach out to if I wanted like specific information about what my employer is required to do. Um So I think one of the big things to emphasize in the context of our masking discussion from last week is that the ADA still requires that you're qualified for the job. So your educational background, your skill set, your work experience still have to qualify you for the position and still requires that you are able to perform the quote essential functions unquote of your job title, meaning that anything you're requesting from a reasonable accommodation perspective does not make you unqualified for the job. So like I just want to like affirm for the people listening that like cuz I can always talk myself out of this as well, but like just because you need noise canceling headphones or you would work better if you were in an office with a door to minimize interruptions doesn't mean that you aren't qualified for your job or you're not like worthy of having that position. Like you're not taking that position from somebody who's better qualified. Um like, even with this podcast, like, things like, "Hey, can we push back recording for an hour?" Or recording remotely. Like, technically, you're not on maternity leave anymore. Like, we don't have to record remotely, but it's so much easier and it,
Mm.
like, works way better for us. So, those types of things, like, it doesn't detract from our qualifications or our ability to do this job well and to do it effectively. So requesting that reasonable accommodation doesn't change the work itself. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of like, this comes up a lot and it's going to continue to come up a lot, I can tell you in the next couple episodes. But us as, adults with this diagnosis and people who went undiagnosed for so long is finding the way to work with it instead of against it.
Mhm.
So, I have a tendency, especially when we were talking about masking, I was like, oh, wow, I really do just every day when I'm working, I'm like beating myself up.
Mhm.
Still, now with the knowledge I have
Mhm.
with this
Oh, for sure.
podcast, I still am like, "Ugh, God, jeez, wish I could just, blah. And I wish I could focus on this and just get this done. And I didn't have trouble getting this, and I wish I wasn't avoiding this all the time and,
Mhm.
constantly in a cycle of doing this. So I think that it's important, especially as you get older, um, that you're more understanding with yourself and you really do find ways to work with the ADHD diagnosis as opposed to constantly fighting it. And
Mhm.
a way to work with it is reasonably accommodating things for yourself.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
adjusting things. There's nothing wrong with adjusting something.
Yeah. Um, so, like, for example, well, I'll give, like, other examples of reasonable accommodations, but, like, something like for us working in an office setting, instead of having 2 15-minute breaks during our workday, splitting that into 6 5-minute breaks so that I can, like, get up and walk around and have a 5-minute break per hour where I am just resetting my nervous system and it's not going to the bathroom or getting water or like doing something that's like not considered break activity, like actually like
Mhm,
getting up from my seat and walking around and putting in like earplugs and just zoning out for 5 minutes so that I can get back to my desk and focus better. Because like having that instead of having a designated you have to take your break at 10 a.m. um like, that doesn't always work for me. Like, sometimes at 10 AM, I'm in the middle of something, and I
yep,
can't take my break, because if I do, then I'll have to completely basically restart that whole project to get my head
mhm,
back to where it was when I was, like, in the zone.
mhm.
Um, so but splitting those 2 15-minute breaks into 6 5-minute breaks doesn't make me incapable or unqualified to do my job.
I remember just being so excited when I went to public sector that I had 2 15-minute breaks. I was like, "Oh my god, I have 2." Like, that means I only have to work for, I'm like calculating, I'm like, 2.5 hours at a stretch or whatever it was. Like, knowing that like, I had worked a job where, like, I couldn't hardly ever step away from my desk. I was, like, the only person there, so it's, like, between phone calls and,
Mhm.
like, trying to, like, take a couple bites of food and run to the bathroom, and, I mean, it was, like, there was absolutely 0 time to do anything.
Mhm.
I remember just being like, 2 15-minute breaks? That is amazing."
Which is wild because the only other time that I've had, like, strict adherence to labor laws like that is when I worked as a teenager in food service. And it was
Yeah.
like, "How long are you here today? Okay, you get a 15-minute break. You have to take it before this time." And, like, I don't know what it is about food service managers that, like, they have it drilled into them that they will go to prison or something if they don't, like, give people their breaks. But, like, it is wild compared to, like, private sector where, like, no, you just work until the job is done. The end. Don't
You
bother me with
work
your silly
until
questions.
you die. There was just, like, it was so different. Um, so yeah, it's just funny because I was like, "Oh my god, this is so cushy. I can take 2 15-minute breaks."
Ah,
Ridiculous.
America. Um,
Truly, truly.
so US courts have ruled that you are required to disclose your ADHD or other quote invisible disability condition unquote to your employer because the employer cannot be expected to accommodate a condition that they're unaware that you are dealing with. So that's for purposes of assessing whether you've been mistreated. So basically, if you have like epilepsy, but you don't outwardly display signs of having epilepsy, your employer isn't at fault if they put you at a desk where like reflections on the glass nearby create a flickering that makes your epilepsy worse. Like you have to notify them that that is a problem for you.
Yeah.
If I don't tell my employer I have ADHD and struggle with time blindness and therefore having a flex schedule where I can just work 15 minutes late if I am 15 minutes later in the morning, I can't like cry about discrimination when I'm reprimanded for being late.
Mhm.
So, as an aside, the ADA does not apply to members of the armed forces or employees of the executive branch of the federal government, federal contractors, and employees of programs receiving federal funds. However, those employees are protected by something called the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which is very similar to the ADA, and it's what the ADA was based on.
Okay, so
Um,
they just use that for, like, federal employees.
yes. So, like, if you're a federal employee, there's a separate statute that would protect you in these situations. So, just FYI, don't refer to the ADA because your HR will laugh you out of the room. Probably not, but you'll be corrected and told to look at the Rehabilitation Act. It's not that I'm giving you the wrong information, it's just that it's different for federal employees. So even with those reasonable accommodations, though, you still have to be able to perform the quote essential functions of your job, unquote, which like for some jobs, like even with my time blindness, I still have to be on time to court. And my employer
Mhm.
can't overlook that aspect of my job just because I have ADHD. That's an essential aspect of my job. It's an essential part of being an attorney is showing up on time to court or submitting a brief on time to the courts or something like that.
Mhm.
So they can't just like whatever is considered essential or what sort of accommodations they can make for you will vary from job to job. So like same goes for working remotely. Like generally speaking, like a nurse, a doctor, a cashier, a food service worker, that's not really a remote position. But if you have a job where working remotely is an option, that might be a reasonable accommodation for you where you can still perform the essential functions of your job from that remote work location. So I know you did this towards the end of your pregnancy where you went full-time remote. Um,
I did 4 days a week remote,
yeah.
and I went in 1 day
Um,
because at that point in pregnancy, I was working from bed. Rough times.
but something like that, you can still do your
Mhm.
whole job
Yep.
fully remote. There's actually a creator, she's like a travel creator that I found on TikTok, but she also is neurodivergent and has some other like mental health conditions that she's pretty open about. But she was recently told that her fully remote job is now like 50% remote. So she has to go in like 2 to 3 days a week. And she talked about like being told that information and why working remotely is so important for her. And she like showed herself kind of just having like a little bit of a breakdown in between meetings where she was like teary and like had to like get a drink of water. And she's like, I couldn't do this at the office. Like I would feel like I had to leave instead of just
Mhm.
like taking the time for myself at home, regrouping and then getting back to work. And like she showed herself going into the next meeting, like that was like 15 minutes later or something like that. So it's those types of things where if you can still do your job remotely and they don't need you in the office, then these are the types of reasonable accommodations that your employer can make for you and are required to make for you under the law. So, if you can articulate how your ADHD affects you at work, you'll be better prepared to assess what kind of accommodations you need and want in your job. So, if you're listening and you're feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed and not sure if you need any accommodations because maybe you're masking a lot or you haven't been like officially diagnosed yet or whatever, um, or maybe you have a job like nursing or teaching where the accommodations might look a little different for you, I would recommend probably discussing this with your therapist because they're going to be well versed in the types of things you could ask for, but also will help you be able to identify the different things that you struggle with and like help you come up with a plan for what that accommodation could look like. So, like, it might just be that noise canceling headphones are the solution, or that you have them remove the light bulbs from directly above your desk so that it's not overhead lighting that is like overstimulating to you. Um,
Or
I
reflects off
stamp
your computer screen so you can't read what's on
yes.
your screen. Katie had a light swapped out above her old desk at her
I was
old
so
job,
pissed.
and she could not see her screen. And we asked maintenance if they could remove this light bulb that they added, and they said that they needed a reasonable accommodation,
Yes. So
which
I
is
had to
just like
put,
so absurd to me.
I had, like, a shawl
Ugh.
that I had at my desk in case I got cold, and I, like, basically created, like, a pillow fort at my desk to, like,
Yeah,
block the light from my computer screen.
I've seen people
And
with umbrellas.
that's reasonable, frankly. I mean, honestly,
It's
I was ready to,
bad
like,
luck.
go in on, like, one of those they have them, like, camping, like, pop-up toilet tent things, but for you to pump at work because they were being so stupid with their, like, nursing room rules or whatever they were.
There's just so many there's so many dumb rules out there.
Yeah, even in public sector.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so what does an ADHD reasonable accommodation look like? Providing a quiet workplace, allowing noise canceling headphones or a white noise machine, working from home some or all of the time, taking allotted breaks as needed, minimizing marginal functions to allow a focus on essential job duties, which I thought was really interesting. If it's like, being asked to write on a dry erase board, for example. Um, allowing assistive technology like timers, apps, and calendars. Actually, at my job, they asked us, I got an email the other day that asked if we wanted to have the Dragon dictation software installed on our computers.
Oh,
I
cool.
declined it because I didn't think that that would be helpful for me. And it's just, for me, I prefer typing it because it helps me like process what I want to put in my reports. But
It would be word soup if I was dictating
right.
information.
But if I had
Mhm.
difficulty, like if I had arthritis in my hands or something, like that would be baller.
Oh,
And
yeah.
um I mean, a
Or
lot of
even
people
if, like, for your ADHD, it was more beneficial to be able
mhm,
to just, like, word vomit and then fine tune it,
yes,
because I can see that being the case too.
for sure.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, because of how long it took me to get diagnosed, the way that I work around my word soup is that I type out my word vomit and then
Me too.
whatever.
Yes.
But it was just an interesting, like, as I was doing these notes, I was like, "Oh, hey, that's
That's
kinda
cool.
cool."
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's
Nice
also
to have
that
the
sort of thing,
option.
like, that was offered to me. It would not have occurred to me to request that.
Mhm.
So, dictation software is another thing that if that would be something that would be helpful to you, then go for it. And again, if their concern is that using dictation software would be disruptive to others, then again, that goes into providing a quiet workspace or an office or a high walled cubicle with a sliding door that
Mhm.
can provide some more soundproofing so that you aren't disruptive to your coworkers.
Mhm. Or
Um,
reserving a conference room or something.
mhm. Also adjusting or modifying examinations, training materials, or policies, like training policies for you, is another option for examinations if you need more time because you struggle with like reading comprehension. That's reasonable. Also, this list said reassignment to a vacant position. Now, I'm not sure. I think what they meant was like a vacant office or like cubicle.
Like a
I don't know
physical
that they
position.
meant like, yeah, like
Hierarchical
a
position.
different yeah,
Yeah.
like and then the last one was job restructuring, and I think that this goes more towards, like, minimizing marginal functions, but, like, making that job more functional overall for the organization, but also functional for you. Obviously, that's not always gonna be possible, and I think the inclusion of it on this list that I got was, like, iffy,
Mm.
um, because, like, I think that's only something that you could really do if you're, like, kind of higher, like, you're above the mid-level supervisor kind of role, like, you'd have to be higher up to say, like, "This is what this job should look like instead." The end.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a bigger deal.
yeah.
I mean, I know, like, for us, public sector, your job title's usually very narrow. Like,
Yes.
you have very specific functions you're supposed to be doing, and they really don't want you deviating from that, so I can't imagine a situation in which they'd be like, "Oh, you just wanna, like, reorganize our job
Yeah.
titles? Sure. Um, so I think that's kind of a tough one.
Yeah. Um, that being said, like, I have volunteered to people above me in my current job to, like, pull me in on additional topics and projects so that I can stay interested because I like trying new things and doing something outside the norm. I like being really good at my job and my primary function, but I like having something else to, like, mix it up. So,
Mhm,
if that's what this means by job restructuring, where, like, my role as an attorney who handles a very specific type of litigation, but also I can be pulled in on different projects if you have a research question that has very little to do with my normal litigation function, then cool. So if that's what this means by restructuring, like letting people know, hey, I would like to be included if you have like a one-off project that you're not sure who to
mhm.
give it to me, I'll take it. But yeah. So also note your employer cannot dock your pay or reduce your salary or refuse a like cost of living adjustment increase just because you require a reasonable accommodation. Now, I don't know how you would prove this. Like, you'd have to look at the salaries of the people who are in the same role as you, which again, public sector or with a union, that is information that you would be able to get access to. Private sector, I'm not sure that you would have that information. But if you do suspect that they're docking if your salary suddenly went down or you were no longer being considered for a promotional opportunity because you've requested a reasonable accommodation, that's a time that I would probably consider. I would either, if you feel comfortable, ask HR about it. If you don't feel comfortable, I would ask an attorney about it. Um, but also worth noting, reasonable accommodations can be temporary. So if you're changing medications and you're trying to get the dosage right or you're having different side effects than what you're used to, so if you go onto a medication that makes you more drowsy than normal, and you're having a really hard time getting up in the morning, then having a later schedule if possible. So like instead of working 8 to 4, maybe you're doing like 10 to 6. Um, that's something that you can also request. So this also applies if you have ADHD and the medication shortages are making it difficult for you to find your Vyvanse or Concerta or whatever medication you're taking to treat your ADHD. So if you like you can request something that you haven't needed before. If I'm suddenly unmedicated in this job because I can't get my medication, or if you're going through withdrawals because you suddenly can't get your
Mm,
medication,
mhm.
you can request those accommodations. So if I had never needed to work in an office with a door before because I was medicated, now I'm not medicated and I can't handle the constant disruptions. I can't handle working in a space where people are walking by me all the time or I can hear other conversations going on. I need to be in a room that is basically four walls and a computer screen to work. Um, that is, and the other option would be to like potentially work from home, the noise canceling headphones, being allowed to log off of Teams or Slack for most of the days, and like telling your team or your like making sure that your supervisor knows they to only contact you with absolutely urgent matters and have like designated times that you log in and catch up on those things. I think that is actually something that was not mentioned in any of these articles I read, but like would probably be a really helpful thing. Like I've muted most of the conversations that I'm a part of in Teams
Mhm.
because I can't be interrupted like that.
I do it
Um,
with even on my phone, like, I have a lot of, especially group chats where
yeah.
I'll turn off notifications. I do it at, Teams at
Mhm.
work. And there are times where if I was really busy and that feeling of just, like, wanting to get something off your plate,
Mhm.
I would put myself in, like, a busy mode,
Yeah.
and let the people know that I hear from the most, like, "Hey, I'm just gonna be working on something for the next couple hours. If it's urgent, I can for sure help you, but
Mhm.
otherwise, you'll hear from me this afternoon or whatever."
Yeah.
Because I just I'm
And
so
most people
distractible.
who are normal, and by normal I mean like not
Neurotypical.
no, I mean like not an asshole,
Oh,
um,
okay, yeah.
are able to also identify for themselves what is an emergency and what isn't.
Mm,
Like,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
so,
mhm, mhm.
like, normal people can say, like, "Oh, no, this is urgent. I actually need to interrupt you. Like, this is an important thing that I need to
Yes.
speak with you about," and are able to discern that information for themselves. Um, so whatever. But I thought that that was, right off my dome. So I came up with that on my own. I feel very proud of it. Um,
I mean, I think it is. Um, I need it just to, like I just feel like I get, like, my brain gets more scattered when I have more, "Badoop, badoop, badoop,
mhm,
badoop."
yeah,
It just turns into, I feel like I'm scattered enough.
mhm,
I don't need help with that. I do
yeah,
a great job all by myself. So I do try and cut down on extra noise. The same reason I can't have, like, a TV on in the background of
mhm,
whatever I'm doing.
yeah,
It's too much brain noise.
mhm, yeah, and I have actually on my phone, it's not do not disturb, but it's like work focus
Mhm,
that the iPhone has, and I set that up so I don't get, like, Instagram notifications, like, I don't get any
mhm,
social media notifications. I get phone calls and text messages, but I don't get email notifications.
mhm.
Anything that, like, isn't urgent does
Yeah.
not come through as a notification on my phone. So and it's also the reason that I switched to a Fitbit over my Apple Watch because my Apple Watch was giving me a lot of notifications. That was
I
just too
hated that about
much.
an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
There was too much functionality. I was like,
Yeah.
I want, like, the heart rate, the steps, roughly tracking workouts, and that's
Mhm.
pretty much it. I do like, the Garmin I have now, sometimes my text messages will come up. There is a
I'm
way to
supposed
turn
to
that off,
have
and
text
I don't know how
messages.
to.
My texts are supposed to come through on my Fitbit. This is the Sense 2, and they don't come through, and nobody on their help team has been able to figure out what the fucking problem is.
Yeah, sometimes they
Um,
do and sometimes they don't on this, and I don't know what I do to change that, but sometimes it happens.
they're supposed to
Sometimes it
like,
doesn't.
I've, like, affirmatively turned on the setting in my Fitbit app so that I get those notifications and calls, and they don't happen, so,
It's weird.
mm,
But I'm
it's
not
really
torn over
irritating.
it because again, it's
Yeah,
just
it's
like,
fine. Like,
with
I
me,
do
I
wish
otherwise.
that it would tell me when I was getting a call because a lot of times when I come home from work, I'm, like, doing stuff and I put my phone down and I have a podcast on and it's just on, like, loud volume, so I don't have headphones in, and
Mhm.
then my phone's still on vibrate, so then I'll get start like, PK will call me and see if, like, I need something from the store on his way home, but if my phone's on vibrate and I'm not, like, listening to the podcast, I don't notice that it has stopped playing because I'm getting a call, so
Yeah, it's my whole life in a
in
nutshell.
which case, I would appreciate that my smartwatch was, like, telling me I'm getting a call, but whatever. So, if you think that your employer is violating its obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act or its equivalent, you should begin discussing the issue with your supervisor, or if that's not practical or successful, with the company's HR department, or if that's not practical or helpful, then to reach, like I said, in New York, there's the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. Reach out to them or reach out to an employment law attorney who could point you in the right direction and, like, let you know, confirm what your rights are and what has been done, and let you know what your options are to move forward. Um, if your claim is against a private employer with 15 or more employees, they should contact the Federal United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. If the EEOC dismisses the complaint or fails to take action within 180 days, the EEOC will issue the employee a quote right to sue letter upon request, and then the employee can file a lawsuit within 90 days of that right to sue letter. So you have to go through the EEOC first if you think you have a complaint against your employer. The idea is that this is kind of like an arbitration option. So it acts like an arbitration option. So it if it can be resolved, if you go to arbitration or you deal with the EEOC and you come to a resolution, then it's done and dusted. If the EEOC doesn't have, they think that your complaint is BS, or there's no action taken, then you can get this right to sue letter. And then you have 90 days to sue. So it's a pretty short timeline once you kind of get the ball rolling on these things. Um, but there are options there. If you're making a claim against a public entity, such as an arm of a state or local government, you can bring the complaint to the EEOC or the US Department of Justice, which helps with enforcement in these situations. But that is asking for reasonable accommodations at work for
Was
ADHD.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's food for thought, because that's not I think the only time I've really tangoed with a reasonable accommodation was when I just was so careful moving this microphone out of the way, and then I immediately hit the cord and booped it. Oh my lord. Um my only experience with reasonable accommodations was when I was pregnant, and I
Yeah.
got a reasonable accommodation to work remotely. Um
Mine is when I got my standing desk from a
oh
note from
yeah,
my
and I got a standing
chiropractor.
neck. Yeah, I had that as well. Um but I think that's it. Like it's not something I've really ever utilized. And I think cuz I
Mhm.
do think of it as like, oh, if somebody's, got a hearing impairment or,
Mhm.
something like that. Um
Yeah.
ways to modify things. I never think of ADHD as being included in that. So,
That's why I thought
it was good to
it was
cover.
worth covering it after masking, because I think
Yeah.
so much of masking is like the shame that we feel as having ADHD, and like
Mhm.
I should be able to focus. I should be able to get places on time. I should be able to keep my desk clean or my house clean or whatever. And I shouldn't have to have all these workarounds. Therefore, the fact that I have all these workarounds, that's on me. That's like my personal failing, not just how my brain works. And
Mhm.
like, I think also finding out that these don't have to be my accommodations forever. If I'm going through something temporarily, I can still get that accommodation for the time being that it's affecting me, which I think is also important for, again, like PMDD or things like that, where if you're going through fertility treatments and like you just need to be able to work from home because the treatments that you're going through are fucking with your body so much,
Mhm.
then like that's temporary theoretically. Those types of things you can like
Or
deal
cyclical.
with. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and, like, those are the sort of things where, like, okay, a couple times a month or, 12 times a year when I'm in this part of my cycle, I need to work 10 to 6 because mornings are tough for me, or I need to have a special chair that allows me to, like, recline a little bit more so that I'm more comfortable, or, like, something that I can put my feet up onto so that whatever, I don't know. Something.
I need to be able to sit like Jiminy Glick
Mhm.
37 and a half hours a week. That's all.
I need that chair that has, like, the 2 layers, so, like, your feet or your knees can be on that
Oh,
one layer
yeah.
and then your butt is up. That's what I need.
I want one of
But it's,
those.
like, $400.
And then you
So
can, like, sit on
expensive.
it, like, backwards or forwards, and, I would do so well with that.
Yeah, same.
I'm assuming. I can also see myself getting it, hating it, and being like, "No, now I'm going to sit upright like a human and not like a shrimp." So, yeah, I sometimes I never know what I'm gonna get.
Mhm. Yeah. I think this would also work, like, for diabetes or something like that, where you have, like, a small fridge on your desk or under your desk
Mhm.
to keep things that, like, look, I can't leave it in the communal fridge because people steal my special diabetic juice or whatever. So, like, I
People
have
steal
to have this
everything from the
here.
fridge.
What?
People steal everything from the fridge.
Oh, I thought you said I wouldn't keep that in the fridge, and I was like, "Well, okay."
I don't know what you want me to do. Yeah, no, that was interesting. That was not something I really knew much about. So I think that's an important one. That's an important topic to talk about.
Yeah,
So
I
good
agree.
job.
Thanks. Yeah, it was very interesting, and, if you guys are listening and you have reasonable accommodations, comment on the post for today's episode so that,
Yeah.
because maybe you're getting something at work that would be a helpful accommodation for someone else that's scrolling through our page.
Or even,
Um,
just a workaround that you use.
mhm.
Like we've talked about that dry erase thing over the
I love
keyboard
that
is
thing.
it's just really handy, and it's
Mhm,
really helped me keep my brain clear during the day at work.
mhm. It helps me also, like, I put kind of like my schedule for the week at work. So if I have like a deposition, I'll put like the time and then like a little checkbox for when my report on it is done so that I can
Mhm.
like visually see that like I'm done. And I have like several different things that I do to make sure that visually I can look at something and know that I finished it. But
Yeah.
either way, just one more thing. And
Yeah.
also that I can shove everything inside of it and make my desk look pretty very quickly.
Yeah. Because that's if there's clutter, my brain is like it's kinda like the notifications. It does the same thing. It makes my brain just chaotic.
Mm,
For sure.
yeah. But anyway, in the meantime, you can check out our merch at bit.ly/ankle high merch. We have, as I said in the beginning, our Patreon is at patreon.com/the bar is ankle high, where you can get ad-free episodes, extended episodes, video episodes added to our close friends list on Instagram, and a shout out on the show. Probably some other stuff. Oh, we have bonus episodes. Forgot about those. We do those
Sometimes.
sometimes. I should probably post that next one, huh? Um,
They're getting video episodes. It's still pretty
um,
great. Extended
and
extended video episodes.
yeah, the video episodes are also extended and
Yeah.
ad-free. Like
Oh,
everything on
yeah.
Patreon is ad-free.
Yeah.
Um, and you can follow us on Instagram and threads at the bar is ankle high. Every Tuesday on Instagram, I post an episode title poll where you can try to guess what we named the upcoming week's episode. And if you're correct, you'll be entered to win a little prize pack from us with a logo sticker and some other goodies. Open to players worldwide, so definitely play and join in. And then on TikTok, we are at Ankle High Pod, and leave us a 5-star review anywhere you find us, but especially Apple Podcasts, and write out a review if you can. It takes like 0.5 seconds, but it really does help us out and helps us grow. And yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah. So remember
So
to ask for accommodations.
yeah, um, wear noise canceling headphones and build yourself a pillow fort at your desk if you need to.
Because the bar is ankle high.
Bye.
Bye.